Yeah, Bev, we're definitely seeing more defiance openly in Shanghai, particularly on things like social media, but also in small protests that people are doing on the streets. Not organised protests, but individuals who are not complying easily with orders to stay at home or to wear masks and so forth. And much of the anger is being generated over the weekend, over the past few days, by these videos that emerged of children. Some of them were babies, some of them were toddlers, bunched together, maybe 3 or 4 in a bed, in a hospital bed, and they were sort of being moved. And the original online reports said that this was a COVID facility for children. Later on, the hospital authorities said, oh, well, actually, no, we were simply moving the children to another area. That's why they were all sort of grouped together. But well, it doesn't really matter, because the common theme is there weren't many adults around. There were nurses and doctors and staff in full PPE, but the parents weren't there, and this is what has whipped up so much anger in China. Today, the Shanghai authorities defended this policy to separate children who have COVID from their parents if the parents don't have COVID. And it's extraordinary. Imagine trying to play out something like this in Australia. If they're under 7, the kids are put in a hospital facility. They're concentrated there for care, but their parents cannot accompany them. If they're over 7, they're sent to a centralised quarantine centre where you also have adults and others. But the point is, if the parents, Bev, are negative, test negative, then they cannot accompany them. And you can just imagine how this is going down in China, particularly in Shanghai, where you have a lot of people online, many mothers, for example, who have just said in comments on Weibo or on other social media, it is just, in their view, unacceptable, and it makes them incredibly worried about actually catching the virus.
Yeah, it seems, Bill, a quite chaotic response. Shanghai now says it has completed the citywide testing drive, but the reality is that there are thousands of new infections every day, so it's not necessarily going to be the end of this as they might have hoped.
Yeah, around about 8,000 or so infections today. Now you say, okay, Shanghai's a big city, 25 million people, it's comparatively not that much. But remember, all the comparisons with overseas don't really matter in China, because you still have a government that is absolutely hell-bent on getting cases down to 0 or as near to 0 as possible. As we know from experience in Australia, if you have 8,000 new cases a day circulating in a city, you're not going to get that near 0 anytime soon. And so this, I suppose, is uncharted territory in China. Even during the Wuhan outbreak, which was at the very start of this entire global pandemic, you didn't have case numbers on a daily basis as high as what we're seeing now in Shanghai. And in Hong Kong, there's been a pullback from the original plan to try and push on with COVID 0. Hong Kong cases surged. They're now down to about 3,000 to 4,000 a day. Technically, the policy there is still COVID 0, but there were plans to lock down the city and to mass test everybody, and those were wound back because reality kind of caught up with the officials. Shanghai, it's difficult to know. It's the mainland. It's still subject to a level of, say, location tracking surveillance, to organisational politics, where they can lock people down for extended periods. They can carry out mass testing very quickly. So we just don't know at this point, Bev, if they really will intend to get those numbers in Shanghai down to 0 again.
Yeah, and it is, something that could backfire. Resources are being spread very thin in some degrees, where you're talking about unnecessarily isolation and quarantining of people that are actually negative.
Yeah, and for those who are positive, officials in Shanghai say the vast majority of them are asymptomatic or very mildly ill. But if you're asymptomatic, doesn't matter. You're being forcibly packed off to a quarantine centre. They've got an expo centre in Shanghai, which is huge. It's full of all these different halls, and the capacity there is around 15,000. Now, you have some foreigners who have been making little videos of their experiences where they turn up, they're given a bucket with a little sort of cloth in it and a bit of hand sanitizer. There's no shower facilities. We've seen some videos on Chinese social media of very, very angry do you even call them patients? They're not particularly sick, but very angry people who have been sent there. They say the toilets are clogged, there's nowhere to wash their face. If they require medicine, there have been delays in getting those medicine supplies. You know, this is a world away from people quarantining at home, isolating if they're asymptomatic or mildly sick, and yet there appears to be no change in direction in China at all. The official policy is to push on with these sorts of measures and try and get those cases back down near zero.
Extraordinary stuff. Good to talk, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bev.